Our opening monologue. It's going to focus on two major points that was brought up by Rush, the king of talk radio, and they have to do with President Trump's agenda, the NFL, the national anthem controversy. We're going to cover all of that in tonight's Florida Live. Very important opening monologue. All right, so today we traveled down to Florida to talk with the leading conservative voice in the country, the one and only Rush Limbaugh. Now, that interview is coming up later tonight. But first, we asked Rush about Republicans in Washington and what they must do to finally start passing you, the people's agenda, the president's agenda. Let's take a look.
This is the deal. I really believe that if for just 3 months going forward, or if they had been 3 months in the past, just 3 months, gut it up for 3 months and work with Trump on his agenda on cutting taxes seriously across the board, immigration reform, the wall, what have you, getting rid of Obamacare, which is just, it's an absolute crime what has happened here and what that's going to mean to the country. Just try for 3 months. Make it look like there's unity between the president and the people of his own party, and they would own Washington for a generation.
Rush makes a great point. 3 months. You know what? This isn't that difficult. Shouldn't be that complicated. And where's the Republican vision and action on passing the president's agenda? In other words, where's their spine, their backbone in fighting for their conservative principles? And also, where's their honor, their dignity to keep their word, their promises? So is repealing, replacing Obamacare and creating health care savings accounts and health care cooperatives? We've discussed this on this program for years, cutting taxes, cutting regulations, energy independence. Is it really that hard to get done? Now, they've been promising they would do these things for years and years. And by the way, more importantly, where is the sense of urgency to help the millions of forgotten men and women in this country that we always talk about? Help those people. This is what the election was all about, and it's what we tell you every single night. 50 million Americans in poverty, on food stamps. You know what? The lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. Right now, Republicans do need to unite. 3 months he talked about. Get the job done. Now, just take a look at how they did come together earlier today when Congressman Steve Scalise, when he returned to the House floor for the first time since that terrible shooting. You know what? That's the type of unity that Congress needs, and it's going to better serve the country. Now, on the topic of taxes, President Trump did unveil his plan yesterday for massive cuts, sweeping reform in the mold of Presidents Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. Now, what those two former presidents did, it worked, and we have decades of hard evidence now to back it all up. Now, back in 1962, 1 year after I was born, at the Economic Club of New York, then President John F. Kennedy, he gave a speech about cutting taxes and unleashing the American economy. Democrats in Congress who oppose President Trump's plan, maybe you guys should pay close attention because you have no agenda. Watch this.
The final and best means of strengthening demand among consumers and business is to reduce the burden on private income and the deterrents to private initiative which are imposed by our present tax system. And this administration pledged itself last summer to an across-the-board, top-to-bottom cut in personal and corporate income taxes to be enacted and become effective in 1963. I'm not talking about a quickie or a temporary tax cut, which would be more appropriate if a recession were imminent. Nor am I talking about giving the economy a mere shot in the arm to ease some temporary complaint.
Wow. Now, President Kennedy, he slashed the top marginal tax rate from 90 to 77%. And guess what happened? The economy soared. Millions of jobs were created. And revenue to the federal government, lower taxes, it didn't go down, it increased. And then when Ronald Wilson Reagan came into office, he started a tax revolution that forever changed the country by letting you, the American people, keep more of your hard-earned money. Now, here's what President Reagan said back in 1981, the first year he was president.
If the tax cut goes to you, the American people, in the third year, that money returned to you won't be available to the Congress to spend. And that, in my view, is what this whole controversy comes down to. Are you entitled to the fruits of your own labor? Or does government have some presumptive right to spend and spend and spend? In a few days, the Congress will stand at the fork of two roads. One road is all too familiar to us. It leads ultimately to higher taxes. It merely brings us full circle back to the source of our economic problems. For the government decides that it knows better than you what should be done with your earnings, and in fact how you should conduct your life. The other road promises to renew the American spirit. It's a road of hope and opportunity. It places the direction of your life back in your hands where it belongs.
And then during Reagan's presidency, he enacted historic tax cuts and reform. Now, let's take a look at this. Reagan slashed the top marginal tax rate from 70 to 28% in the course of his presidency. Economic growth, it took off in a way America has not seen since. In 1984, GDP hit 7.3%. Now, compare that to President Obama. He was the first president in history to never have an entire year at even 3% GDP growth. And on top of all that, Reagan created 20 million new jobs after the 1982 recession. Revenues to the government, again, they doubled. And America saw the longest period of peacetime economic growth. Now, what Ronald Reagan did worked, and it changed the trajectory of the country forever. Now, President Trump, modern day, he's trying to do the same thing. Now, take a look at what the president said while he was unveiling his new tax plan yesterday. Watch this.
This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and I guess it's probably something I could say that I'm very good at. I've been waiting for this for a long time. We're going to cut taxes for the middle class, make the tax code simpler and more fair for everyday Americans, and we are going to bring back the jobs and wealth that have left our country, and most people thought left our country for good. We want tax reform that is pro-growth, pro-jobs, pro-worker, pro-family, and yes, tax reform that is pro-American.
And now Democrats, now they have no solutions. They're already coming out in full force against President Trump's plan, and they're going to insist that any bill that passes, it has to soak the rich in taxes. But that's not what Reagan did. And what these obstructionist Democrats won't tell you is this. Top-earning Americans already pay way more than their fair share. For example, the top 1% of wage earners in the country, they contribute 39.5% of personal federal income taxes. The top 10% of Americans, they pay 70.9%. Now, let's compare that. The bottom 50% of wage earners in America, they pay 2.8%. And there's almost, and this is a good fact, that 35% of tax filers, they pay zero, zip, nada, nothing. And by the way, they'll pay even less under President Trump's plan, which, of course, the media is not highlighting. Now, President Trump has momentum in growing the economy, which is why we need tax reform. You want to make it better. We want the engine to soar. Second quarter, GDP was just revised upwards to 3.1%. Much better than Obama. Compare that to him. The first president in history never reached 3% GDP growth in a single year of his presidency. That's history. Pay attention. Kennedy, Reagan, Obama. One side works, one doesn't. And since his election, President Trump, he's worked with all of these companies to bring jobs back to America, to help the forgotten men and women. And the Trump administration, they have either pulled or suspended 860 burdensome Obama-era regulations. Now, like Rush was saying earlier tonight, putting the agenda in place to fix the economy, it shouldn't take Republicans in Congress longer than 3 months. And unlike the rest of the conspiracy theory, fake news channels out there, you know what? On this program, we made you a promise on Monday. We are interested in solutions. We want to help people. So, to Congress tonight, it's time to get to work. Get the job done. Is 3 months of hard work serving the American people, is it really that hard? And also tonight, the fallout continues over some in the NFL disrespecting our flag, our national anthem, and, of course, our military. Now, I also asked Rush, this interview coming up in a minute, about this controversy. He's a huge NFL fan. Take a look.
They're backtracking now. Well, this is not about protesting the flag. This is not about... Yes, of course it is. They try to say that's how it all got started. If they really wanted to make it, you think they could, if one of these players or group of them called you and said, we want a half hour on your show, would you give it to them?
100%.
Why did they do that? Why are they messing around on the sideline, disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the anthem? What's the point? They're not accomplishing anything except harming the enterprise. Whatever's happening in the NFL right now, it's not how you grow it.
You know what? That's a great idea from Rush. And as I said to him, I'll be more than happy. I'll invite NFL players, coaches, owners, those who protest the national anthem. You're invited on the show. We'll give you an hour. We'll give you 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it takes. And you know what? We'll do a town hall. You want to fill up a football stadium? We'll even do that for you. You know what? All of you can come. All you have to do is show up. And by the way, if you're really interested in solving problems and finding solutions for this country, then I think it's time that we've got to talk about solutions. And you know what? We can solve a lot of problems. Let's talk about reducing violence in places like Chicago. Let's discuss ways to improve America's horrific, broken educational system. Want to have a conversation? How about helping the millions of people in this country who have been left behind? 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more Americans in poverty under Obama, and we doubled the national debt. You know what? What we don't need is people like the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, Gregg Popovich, using this issue to try and divide the country even further. Don't believe me? Take a look at this.
Our country's an embarrassment in the world. There has to be an uncomfortable element in the discourse for anything to change. You know, whether it's the LGBT movement or, women's suffrage, race, it doesn't matter. People have to be made to feel uncomfortable, and especially white people, because we're comfortable. We still have no clue of what being born white means.
Does that really help the country? Now, unfortunately, there are people like that, and especially on the left, they try to exploit, especially in this case, the NFL protests, and a lot of people want to advance a political agenda, political causes. And as President Trump has said repeatedly, this comes down to simple, basic, fundamental respect. Respect for the flag, respect for our anthem, respect for the military that fought under that flag. Now, the national anthem is something, it should bring every single American together. For some reason, there are people who are trying to now use it to tear us apart.